Rev up your engines!
Well, now the Congressional Budget Office says the United States can avoid default by July. Well, you know, the problem is the United States government operates on borrowed money. And for decades, they've been borrowing it for almost no interest. And the only thing they were paying back was a tiny amount of interest, which was almost nothing. Now the interest rates are going higher because if you have the interest rates that low, that long, you're going to get rapid inflation because people get money for nothing. So the value of money goes down, so everything costs more. That's why things are so expensive, because of the financial systems that the politicians have set up so that the government can borrow money for almost nothing, and then it doesn't have to pay hardly anything back, and it can waste all our money on things, and they never worry about the principal, right? They're just paying the interest. The principal is just insanely big, and they never even talk about that. What they're talking about is paying the interest so they don't go bankrupt and they can't pay the interest anymore. So it's kind of like somebody buying a house and they never pay it out. They have like a 1,000-year loan and they just keep pushing it into the future. Well, the government does the same thing. They push everything into the future only. With the interest rates high, they're stuck that they can't pay that higher interest rate off, so they have to go more in debt, borrow more money, which of course, it's an endless circle. The more you borrow, the more you owe. Well, then you got to borrow some more. If we operated that way as individuals, we would all be bankrupt and we'd all be insolvent. Basically, the government is insolvent, but they play tricks with wording to say, oh, no, don't worry, we got money. And this is what they say, and I'm quoting them. Tax revenues and emergency measures after June 15th will probably allow the government to continue financing operations through at least the end of July. Car example. The Japanese that have been building cars better, progressively over time. They take years to perfect them, right? They're thinking years ahead. These clowns are thinking a month or two ahead for the government running, right? I mean, there's clowns running the show. There's no arguing that. As the Bureau report says, if the debt limit remains unchanged, there's significant risk that at some point in the first 2 weeks of June, the government will no longer be able to pay off its obligations. The obligations being paying the interest, which for all these decades has been small, and now it's starting to rise again. It's been absurd for over a decade and a half. Almost no interest at all. So that means they're getting money for almost nothing. And when people get money from almost nothing, they don't care if they gamble it away. It's not their money. And their interest paid is so low, why not take a gamble? Borrow $1 million and pay a tiny amount of interest. If you make money, you make a fortune. If you lose, well, it's their money and you'll go bankrupt, right? Now they're all worried the government's going to go bankrupt because they've been operating that way for a long time. Now that the interest rates are getting higher, they can't do that. So they're going to do a lot of paper shuffling around. You can guarantee you that. They'll start shuffling the old paper around saying, oh no, it's actually great, you know? It affects us all. And then they come up with these harebrained schemes like, well, let's tax people who have good credit rating who are paying on their homes to favor the people who screwed up and have horrible financial rating. Nobody wants to loan them money. Well, let's start loaning these people money and we'll tax the people who did a good job to pay for it all, you know? Harebrained ideas, right? Harebrained. Clear all this up again by pushing it into the future and making figures pop out of nowhere that don't mean anything and continue to borrow money to pay for stuff. Look at Canada. They're in a big economic mess from all the stuff that Trudeau gave away and $500 billion plus they printed up in money. Now the average house in Ontario is like $900,000. They have insane inflation. We're trying to stop the inflation here by raising the interest rates, right? But then the government goes bankrupt. That's the one problem with it. My brother-in-law warned me of this years ago, and it's true. So we'll see what happens. They'll just probably continue to push the paper around, pretending they fixed it all by magic of bureaucracy. Damien says, what's your thoughts? 75 to 85 Mercedes-Benz 450 SL convertible. I'm looking for a weekend car. Back in the days, those are the big V8 convertibles that everybody wants and but now they're so old. And the fuel injection system on that thing is an old-fashioned Motronic fuel injection system. They clog up. They need a bunch of work, and about every stinking rubber gasket on that thing is going to start leaking. You'd have to pull the engine out, put new seals on, reseal the transmission. The brakes will start leaking. Now, if you're mechanically inclined and you want to get one that at least shifts and runs okay, they could be a fun toy, right? But don't get in over your head. Don't buy some clunker and think you're going to fix up. I've had more customers do that. Then years later, they had a bunch of money in it and they end up selling it for peanuts because it was never done right and it never ran right. If you go and actually runs it, goes shows you want a toy, great. Don't put too many miles on it. As a classic, you can insure them relatively cheap if it's just a toy you don't drive much. Insurance hardly costs anything. But don't get one that's all rusted out. Those things are rust buckets. If you're up north, look at the frame. Look underneath. If it's rotten, don't buy it. Tyler says, what's a better car to buy in Europe? A 2022 Suzuki Vitara 1.4 hybrid, 10,000 kilometers, or 2023 Toyota Yaris Cross hybrid with 10,000 kilometers? Oh, I'd buy the Yaris. They started with the Prius. They mass-produced them way before everybody else. I'd definitely go Toyota on that one. Esther says, Scotty, I got a small crack near the top of my radiator in my 97K 1500. It doesn't seem to leak unless I push it hard. Can I temporarily fix it with anything? Yeah, get some of that Bars leak that's a radiator sealers. All the auto parts stores, AutoZone, O'Reilly, they sell it. Don't get the cheapest one. Get the good one. It's like 20-something bucks. And you put it in, and it can often stop the leak for a while. It's worth a try. It doesn't hurt anything. It mixes with all the different coolants. It's not going to hurt anything. It's going to last sometimes a year or two. Quadrajet said, Scotty, will 1 extra quart of oil in a 2010 HRSS ruin the engine? I went back to the dealer to take the quart out. They said, no, it won't damage the engine. What do you think? Well, I think they're idiots. You don't want too much oil. It builds up pressure, can blow the seals. Now, they don't want to have to take the drain plug out, drain it out, put it in, fill it back up. But you don't even have to do that. I have a suction machine, right? And you can stick it in the dipstick, take the dipstick out, stick it in a hole, and you pump a quart out, and that's it. When people bring me vehicles like that, that's what I do. I just use my pump, I pump it out. Maybe get a pump, do it yourself, and don't go back to those scumbags. If they tell you it won't hurt anything, it will. Too much oil will blow the seals. Don't listen to them, they're full of crap. Crypto Superdog Gaming says, Scotty, is an old Jeep Cherokee from 93 to 2001 a good project car for off-roading? The Jeep Cherokees, they're not that off-roady. They became more SUV-ish. I mean, you can take them off-road if it's a four-wheel drive version 1. They made millions of them. You can get parts for them relatively cheaply. Just realize it isn't a heavy-duty off-roader. You can do some, but it's not really made for off-roading. You get a regular Jeep for that, not the Cherokee. But if it's four-wheel drive, you want to do some stuff, it can be fun. You can get them dirt cheap. Legend said, Scotty, I'm going to change the spark plugs and coils in my Ridgeline. How tight do I make the spark plugs? I've been doing it for years. I just do it by feel. If you want, just go and look up the torque specifications. If you have a torque wrench, it'll tell you how many foot-pounds of the spark plugs. I use all that information myself, but that costs money. I'm a mechanic, so I pay for it. And I just look up torque specifications. I put my torque wrench on how many foot-pounds it says, and then I turn the wrench until it clicks, and then I'm done. You don't need to put anything on the plugs because they've already got the coating, the new ones. Just take the old ones out, put them in. And if you don't use a torque wrench, get them snug so they're snug, and then pull them like 30 or 40 degrees more, and that's tight enough. Tapeworm says, Scotty, should I change my oil filter more than my actual oil? Well, only if you use a cheap oil filter. If you read closely on oil filters, you look at the cheapies that they sell, like the $3.99, it'll say I'm good for 3,000 miles. Well, if you change your oil every 5,000 to 10,000 miles, you would have to change it because they're not good. Buy the quality oil filters, and they're good for 10,000 miles. So, you buy a quality one, no. I know they rip you off at the auto parts stores, right? You go to the auto parts stores. Well, our premium filters are $14.99. Well, do like I do. Go to Amazon, and you can find quality oil filters there for like $5 instead of $10. Wanda Gray says, Scotty, the Toronto Maple Leafs are out and headed for the golf course. I know you're a hockey fan. Thoughts? Well, I grew up in Niagara Falls. I went to school in Toronto. I used to be a big Toronto fan, but then I moved to Texas, so I became a Dallas Stars fan. I'm still kind of a Dallas Stars fan. I was there longer than I was in Canada, right? Well, the problem with the Toronto Maple Leafs are they turn into these gigantic chokers, right? And their management and their coaches are idiots. You can see they put all their money into these high guys like Matthews. They get paid a ton of money, and in the playoffs, they stink, and they don't have any money left off for a good goalie. Goalies win Stanley Cups. They don't have a goalie. They're not going to win a Stanley Cup. Right? And it's not that easy to get a goalie. You got to kind of bring him up. They tried Murray. Yeah, so he won with Pittsburgh years ago. He's washed up too. You can see he's injured all the time, right? So they play some rookie guy. The rookie guy did as good as he could, right? But I mean, hey, the team's defenses, and they choke. What were they? 1 win and 5 losses at home in the playoffs? It's terrible. They just joke. They're jokers. A bunch of young, spoiled rich kids. They pay them too much money. Back in the day, when I was a fan in the 60s, these guys didn't make that much money. They only played Friday, Saturday nights, right? They didn't play that many games. It was more exciting. Now they play so many games to put you to sleep. It's not as exciting as it used to be. You don't get the skating and the playmaking. Now you just get dump and chase, and it's boring. Toronto just blows it every year because their management's terrible. It's been terrible for decades. Hey, they have won since '67. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.